Hi, I'm Duque. Welcome to Shattering Glass in Heels. Joining me in today's segment is Lilit Davtyan, 2023 LA Times B2B Publishing's Inspirational Woman Leadership winner in the CEO category. Lilit embodies the lift as you climb mentality and is so incredibly generous with lifting other women in the community. But to me, I am so grateful that she's my best friend. Thank you for jumping on my podcast, and I'm just really excited to have you here as a guest and really talking about shattering glass in heels, which is really the journey and direction where you and I are both on, particularly the glass ceilings in corporate America. I want to know a little bit about your story, right? Your background of being Armenian and also an immigrant, and what motivates you to want to climb and shatter the glass ceilings in corporate America, and just a little bit about your story.
Yeah, thank you. And before I start, I want to say congratulations, Christine. This is absolutely amazing. You're going to touch a lot of hearts. You're going to resonate with so many women. And I think that it's time that this method of communication is out there in the most authentic way possible. And I know that's exactly the type of person that you are. So I'm very proud of you. And thank you for having me on your podcast. I know my challenges are probably not unique, but they are definitely, I think there's so many challenges that people will resonate with it. But at some point, you try to deal with it in your own way, right? As much as we can all commiserate or go through them and brainstorm, you still have to personally deal with them in your own unique way. I was born and raised in Armenia. I came to America when I was 12, and English was my third language. And so in the process of learning English, you're trying to build this ambition. And I became very studious. I loved reading and I loved math. And eventually I realized I could do a lot with this. And so I did take on some really large corporate jobs, but, by looking at my trajectory, you'll see I went smaller and smaller over time because I realized the bigger the company is that you're working for, the more of a small fish you tend to be in a bigger space, which is great. And it actually works for most people, not myself. And because I put some certain challenges for myself that I want to accomplish, and there's limitations in the corporate world that you can't really accomplish. So for example, if you qualify to get ahead faster, it's still a slower timeline. It's still based on observation of the group that you're in and based on the title that you have, which is shared with 500 or 1,000 other people. And so I decided selfishly that just doesn't work for me. The type of person that I am is, let me go at my own pace, whether it's fast or slow. Let me learn things. Let me try to figure out what my strengths and weaknesses are. You can have mentors to help you do that. You can have other groups to help you do that. But those challenges definitely are there. But the problem is the challenges change. So when you're associate level employee is different than when you're senior level employee, and it's definitely absolutely different when you're an executive, because your challenges are not just yours. Now you have the challenges of the teams that you're running, and you have to learn how to protect them because that's your job. And so when they're going through challenges, you put everything aside that you're going through and you help them first, because that's what it takes to be a good leader. But it's also a very, very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I know. That's the part that people don't realize, that when you're in the executive, it's not that you're an individual contributor, right? It's because you're actually managing people and teams. And you and I have the same kind of leadership style where we're very collaborative with our teams, and we take on that big mama bear type, situation. That's where right. We try to protect them from a lot of the minutia, that they don't really need to learn. And because I think you and I also value the fact that, like, hey, these are real people that we're dealing with, right? That we're trying to protect, and all the responsibilities that come into that. So.
And the likelihood is they're going through the same challenges that you did. And so you have two options as a leader. You can tell them, hey, this is how I learned, and you do the same, which is great. And it works for some people. The way I look at it is, let me tell you my experience so you can figure out if that's the path you want to take. And then so I'm giving them a little bit of leeway for them to not have to make the same mistakes as me. If they choose to make it, that's a personal decision that you make. But at least I did everything in my power to give all of the possible options to the person that I'm leading.
Yeah. So one of the things that you and I have talked about is the statistic around like 80% of Asian women fall off the corporate executive track in corporate America. Particularly for me, in the last couple of years, even in our friendship, has been a heavy conversation between you and me. And in the last couple of years, it's really asked me to dig really deep to understand, well, what are my motivations, right, around that? And my story so much comes from my just the survival instinct. There's no one that's coming to save me. There's no one that's coming to take care of me. Failure is simply not an option in my life. And I know that that's a lot of what drives my motivation and for success in my career. The success now in terms of like trying to break that glass ceiling for me is different. It's not just success for my career. I want to break this for the next generation and for others, because it is just disappointing, 80%, right?
Yeah.
And even at that, when you look
Yeah.
at 1%, 1.5% of the S&P 500 is what you would get from a top-level executive that's Asian. And that's really, really disappointing. And so I want to ask you, right, as a CEO, as you start to kind of really think about your journey, your climb, and this motivation of wanting to break the glass ceiling, what's your motivation around wanting to break the glass ceiling?
Well, my motivation is, my level of confidence is a little different because I worked on it, right? I come from a very reserved culture, especially when it comes to men versus women, not versus, but men and women dynamics, right? And so it's not known for a woman in my culture to be business savvy and not only not be business savvy, but even to try and go and get clients and have these high level discussions and negotiate. I mean, that's like women do not negotiate. You just leave it. but those things come from like I'm very observant. I see what I like. I see the style that I like and I want to learn it. And if I'm good at it, I want to exercise it. And if I'm not, I'll leave it to the people that are better at it. I think culture does play a role in some ways. In most ways, when you get to corporate, they don't really care, right? Because and you care. So you have your values based on your culture and you have a certain way of doing things. You drop all of that at the door when you enter the corporate world. That's what's expected of you. However, I do think there is a sense of bias, right? So, for example, when I worked at a much larger company, there were a lot of Asian women in the company, and the Asian women are known to be book smart. They're known to get really good scores, and all of that generalization is still there. It's in the mindset of the corporate world. So I think that even just with that knowledge, they're offered positions that are better suited for, hey, research and analytics and all of these things. And I think that makes a really big impact in their personality. And I think that they box themselves up, meaning like this is what they've spent the last 5-6 years doing. This is what they're good at. And they haven't really had the time to explore other alternatives, such as the businesses that you and I are in, which is the opposite side. Sure, we've done research, we've done the analytics, but we're go-getters and we want face-to-face. We want to negotiate, we want to talk. We're okay to be told no here and there, but not every woman can handle that. I mean, not a lot of people can, but women specifically. And so by the time they hit my door, they're already in their box. They're telling me the type of job that they want. They want to be in those analytical positions and they want to be in the research side. They don't want to be in sales. And so I think the change has to come from education level, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
I think that we need to change the stigma, and I think that we need to offer up a lot of educational material and environments for them to stimulate the other part of their personality that they haven't tapped into yet.
No, I agree with you there. I think one of the things as well from the research and just even my own experiences is when it comes specifically to like the Asian demographic, right, there is a whole lot around culture and understanding that culture that, is part of the vernacular around DEI initiatives in corporate America. But no one really talks about managerial type of advocacy. And I think that is a very big miss, right, in terms of, promoting that. And I think, to me, one of the impetus around the book is I want that conversation and out there on the table around advocating more for managerial positions, not just for Asian women, but for women within the BIPOC community, for women in general, right? And I think we're, especially now post-pandemic, I think we've got some challenges in terms of other corporations looking at return to work and very stringent rules around that instead of providing that flexibility and hybrid. And for women, right, we're caretakers, we're mothers, and there's just so many dynamics within our roles and responsibilities as women that make it really, really challenging. You're a CEO of a corporation and your executive suite is mostly women. And what would you say, like, are maybe some of the challenges that you've seen out there, and where you really think about, what can people learn from you and what you've done in your company to pave the way to really just open up that aperture, to provide that support for women, to provide, just that runway to allow us to be successful?
It's a great question, and I definitely see the challenge there. The problem is this: I was very adamant, not just about building a C-suite of executive women, but also being authentic, right? My goal isn't to have a full C-suite of women only. It just worked out that way because of many reasons. One of the reasons is I'm very authentic. The conversations that I have are open and honest from the very beginning, because what I don't want is to give a job that doesn't fit somebody, and what I don't want is for them to take a job they know they're not qualified for. And so when it comes to family dynamics, for example, they tell me, like, I open up the door, I don't ask any questions, you don't have to share anything with me. But when you start talking about kids and challenges and, health and all these things that women are going through, and, taking care of your parents, when you start opening it up, at least you've done yourself a favor to know, is this the type of culture that's going to support you, or is it not? What we tend to do as women, we tend to hide a lot of information to get our foot in the door. And very soon we realize it was the wrong place, wrong culture. And it affects us a lot more than had we spent a little more time being authentic and saying the accurate things to get the right support. Now it's, I have an open door policy. I have employees that have been here for 2 days, and I have employees that have been here for 8 years, and they all get the same treatment. I have an open door policy. You come in here and you tell me for the next week your children are out of school. How can I support you? Do you need to work from home? Do you need childcare? Do you need a different time adjustment? What do you need? I'm going to hear it out, because what I can't do is say, no, you don't have that problem. The problem is there, and it's not a problem. I'm a mother too. It is absolutely not a problem. It's part of our identity, and we shouldn't have to put that in a secondary box. The reason we work is to be nurturing at home. It's not the other way around.
I love that, right? And I think, I'm going to play devil's advocate, right? Just the big corporations may say, well, is that driving your productivity less or more, right? Because I think that that's the biggest fear, especially with large corporations, is that productivity goes down. What do you say to that? What's your counter to that?
I think it's not accurate. However, what I do think is, when you put somebody on a spot like that, you've already given them your opinion about this, right? So it's hard for them to even argue with you, because how do you argue with the fact that you do have kids, or you do have parents that you're taking care of, or whatever your circumstances? It could be completely different from that, right? How do you argue that when somebody came at you with an opinion already, and they're in an authority position? They didn't open up a conversation. They gave you their bias and they asked you to prove them wrong. And I think that type of conversation has to change. I think it's more of, hey, we all have to respect the fact that we have our challenges, and men are different than women, and in so many ways, which is why men and women can actually work really well together. You and I know some of the best mentors for the most successful women have been men. And there is a reason for that. But those women have been authentic, right? We've told our mentors everything that has challenged us. We've asked them for their advice. We haven't been offended by what they said. And if they are biased, we have the confidence to tell them our side of this. But it's not easy to do. I think that level of confidence needs to be practiced and built over time.
No, absolutely. I mean, for me, in my career, in just the industry that I play, most of my sponsors and mentors have been men. And actually, you and I met because of my sponsors.
Exactly.
And they had this sixth sense about you and I meeting, but I don't think they realized what that power really meant.
The mistake that they made.
Is it a mistake? Maybe. So definitely a lot of power. But anyway, to those amazing gentlemen, thank you for this amazing friendship and bringing us together. But I mean, that is a fact. And I think this is also just I love this about your company, right? Although you have a really strong leadership team of women, there's so much about the way that you create that balance between men and women within your organization. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Because you were very purposeful in how you really thought about creating that culture and had so much research. And I think there's a lot that people can learn from what you did and how you're establishing your culture.
Yeah, I definitely do. I consider everything, right? There is, we're in the tech space and most of the industry is male dominated. There's a lot of conferences. It is literally probably one of the biggest revenue generators going to conferences, meeting people face to face. Um, and it's not very easy for women, A, to travel, and two, to be comfortable with being in that environment. And so I have never sent a woman by herself to any conference. It's always, I have a buddy system. And for some reason, and it's not because I've practiced it, but the culture that we've built here is no woman gets left behind. If we're sitting there because the dinner's going too long and there's drinks afterwards, one of the sales guys will stay with the coworker, female coworker, until everything is done. Make sure they're safe, they're back in their room, and then they go, they usually mingle way past we do, but they keep each other safe, and I love it. And that's just a culture that naturally was built. And I do come back to the fact that the authenticity has helped grow that. The types of conversations, like if somebody goes to a male counterpart and says, hey, after this dinner, for example, I don't feel safe, naturally, like their male instincts kick in again. Like the difference is so good, which is why we work so well together. We just need to identify them and keep them separate and not try to compete so much, right? But the thing is, when it comes to competition, what the biggest issue I've ever had in our company is how women treat each other. It's never been how men treat the women or vice versa. Like it's kind of insane. Like you're trying to build this, and it's not unique to our company. It's very well known. I mean, you have a lot of stories too, and I have my own personal stories. But it's we're trying to ask for all of these things, and we're trying to get into the door, and we're trying to have a seat at the door. But behind the scenes, we're kind of screwing it up for each other. And that needs to change. That definitely needs to change. I have zero tolerance for all of that at work.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up, right? Because there is a dark side to female rivalry. And it's always existed throughout history, whether it's the systems that say there can only be one queen, or just the fact that, like, I don't know, that just that competition with women, the dark side of female rivalry is real. Like, I mean, Desperate Housewives, Bridgerton. Like you can like look at pop culture and see that. I think there's a line because I was recording the audiobook last night and like when one woman has it better, another woman has it bitter. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I forgot that I wrote that line, but it's so true. And it's like, how do you break that, right? And I think people always think about like, how do you break people down? And even Blake Lively and Taylor Swift like to like lift each other up. And actually, that's what I love about you and me. Like, you're one of the most amazing women that I know that knows how to like, who makes it a priority to lift other women in her community. And that's just, you and I are built the same way that way and have surrounded ourselves with even larger networks and communities that we're now interconnected, that we all just rise. And I mean, it's not that hard, but why do you think women just can't quite get past that female rivalry thing? What is it? Because it's not in my DNA to do it, and I still don't. I mean, but I know the stories and I've seen it, but it's just not. It's not me personally. But I don't know if you have a thought around that, and and I just think that we just need to be better.
Yeah, and I'm gonna try to say everything I want to say without sounding inappropriate in any way, right? So I think that the competition between women and the competition between men are very different. We both have a sense of competitive nature, but it's different, right? Men compete mostly for money and for power and all these things. Women compete over stupid things. Like we compete over who has the best new bag. We compete over whose child is smarter, and we compete over like I don't know who has the hottest guy, whatever, right? And it's like, and by the time we get to the corporate level, we've continued to do the ridiculous competition that we've lost track of what's actually important. And what's important is there's limited seats at the table, and we need to change that. We need to make sure that the seats at the table are well balanced, so we don't have to compete for that seat. Because when we do finally compete for that seat, we're not even focusing on the merits to get there. We're focusing on how many people can I make sure don't have an opportunity to get there so I could get that seat. That is that's not a good way to think about this, right? Because you are almost lowering your own standards. You don't believe in yourself. And to me, like the way I've always thought of it is, hey, if somebody's smarter than me, if somebody's better than me, if somebody deserves a seat more than I do, there's a better seat for me. That's the way I look at it. But for them, it's a little bit different. It's like, hey, limited opportunity. I know this one thing about this person. I know their buttons. I can push them, and I know that I can get them to slow down while I make it there. It's not healthy, and I know it's not just women. It's just more in women than it is in men. It's not healthy. It's super catty, and it's surprising that that sometimes doesn't end even at executive positions.
No, I 100% agree. And I think part of it is that the systems in place in corporate America, particularly in larger corporations, you're right, it kind of perpetuates that even more. It fuels it even more, right? There is that natural female rivalry that exists, but you can easily tame it down. But then when you create this pressure cooker that there are only so many seats at the table, you kind of amplify that competition. And it's, whew, it's really, it's
Yeah,
tough.
and the problem is, Christine, the issue is it's not that every woman wants to be that catty, and they usually don't even want to be that competitive. What happens is that's what they see, right? So when somebody reaches out to me, usually it's students, right? They're about to graduate, they're trying to figure out what their next steps are, they want some advice. And there's not a single student that has messaged me for advice that have turned them down. No matter how busy I am, I will find 15, 20 minutes to talk to them because I know what rejection feels like. And if they start that way, that confidence level is always going to stay low. So why not? Why can't I give 15 minutes of my time to change? I don't know. It might boost their confidence so high that the next person they talk to is way more important than me and they might actually get the job of their dream. But if I shut them down, they're going to expect to be shut down every single day. And that makes them competitive. And it's like, well, how did this person get there? And then they see what happens in executive level corporate positions, right? It's like, hey, that person, the rumor is 5 years ago, this is how they got there. And so I have to do the same thing. I don't want to, but if that's how women get there, that's how women get there. It's not true. It's really, really not true. It's a perception, and we just need to change it. The more of you and I's there are, I think the better the corporate world would be.
I totally agree with you there. So, uh, yeah, those were my questions. I know you had questions for me. You've read the book. you've
I
been,
did.
you've read, no, you've read every chapter. You've read every
I
iteration of every
did.
chapter.
I have a question for you
Yeah.
actually. And I always think of this, right? I've had my own challenges, and there some are big, some are small, but you navigate them through them. My main thing is I never regret anything. I never hold grudges, and I would never go back and change anything.
Sure.
The reason for that is I think I would not be who I am today if it wasn't for those challenges. Do I think that in hindsight? Sure, I could have been better if it wasn't, but I don't want to risk it, right? How do you feel about that? You've gone through a lot, you've seen a lot, you've experienced a lot. What do you say about those? How has it shaped you?
No, I think that's a really great and valid question, right? Because one way to look at this is like, wow, how terrible of an experience it is in corporate America. And, do you hate it? Is this a hate? Is it an I hate you letter? Like, no, it's not. It's actually the fact that I do love corporate America so much. All the companies that I've worked for and the experiences that I've had, I'm so grateful for all of that because it's built me to who I am. But I want to acknowledge the fact that microaggressions do exist, that it is not perfect, and there's a lot of old narratives and old standards that need to be broken down to accommodate to the workforce of today, to accommodate towards the moment of now, that a lot of these companies were frankly not built historically to accommodate them, right? If you look back 100 years ago, this conversation around Asian women or even women or people within the BIPOC community wasn't something that even existed or could be a possibility because it just wasn't the norm. But we're living in such a different moment of now and coming off the pandemic and really challenging the idea of bringing your authentic self, right? I think we've learned that swipe in, swipe out, walk in, walk out is not the way that the world works anymore. And that's definitely not the way that we've been working even before the pandemic. And to your point, I don't think it's a life versus work type situation where you're thinking about life-work balance, right? I think you're looking at a kind of life continuum, and I think people want to wake up every day with purpose. They want to go to jobs that they feel valued and are seen as human, right? And valued as human beings. And I think that's part of the reason why I wrote this book, because I want to challenge these old structures, these old narratives. I want corporate America to be better. We know that diverse people in the table means diverse ideas and ways that actually means better profitability for corporations. You want that. I want diverse teams because they're winning teams, and that's always been my, strategy, but I want more of that. And I want to pave the way for more people like us to come in and create that critical mass of people of color and women of color to feel safe in corporate America, mentally and physically, and to really feel that they have those opportunities where it's not just one of a few of us trying to lift everyone up, where there's more of us to provide that opportunity. And I think those are the structures that need to change. And when you look at the landscape of America and the landscape of the world and the workforce, it's changing. It's more diverse than people think, and you can't ignore that. And I think that's the conversation for now of how do you start to shift that. So I'm not angry. I'm not upset. I'm just challenging the fact that we should do better and we can be better. And
I completely agree with you.
And I love all the corporations I work for. I really do.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I feel the same way. I think there is a space in our history where America was built by men and in very large, corporations, call it insurance, oil, gas, whatever it is, right? And today's generation is different. And so they cannot themselves do this anymore. Things have changed too fast. We've developed too many things. It requires more brain power and different mindsets and cultures and values to come together and have an amazing brainstorming session. It's my favorite thing to do, by the way, brainstorm. Not just be told what to do. You don't want to sit in there where two people are, launching processes and telling you what to do and how to do this. And they're like, okay, they're going to do it because they work for you and they get a paycheck, but they might have had an idea that could have been revolutionary for you, right? And that's just the open communication. I think what companies are doing today that's good and bad is they're trying to diversify, but they're doing it as a quota. They're not doing this because they absolutely believe in it. They're not doing this because they find the value in it. They're doing it because they look bad otherwise, or they're regulated in a way that they have to. And that needs to change ASAP.
100%.
Because as long as they put us in a bubble, we're always going to be in a bubble, no matter how much we fight. And the other thing that needs to change is, women, there's a lot of empowering women out there. They do speak. They do have large audiences. What's consistent in the audience? All women, or mostly women, or 95% women. How do we educate the men about what we want and why we want it? And mostly why we want it, right? It's like everybody knows what they want. Everybody says what they want, but why? I mean, I think they've been groomed for so long to be the type of executives that they are. It's hard for them to just open up their arms and accept us, because we shouldn't go in there saying, hey, I want A, B, and C. Yeah. It's like, hey, here's how I can help. Here's where my value can be shown. And here's how I can actually go through the process of showing it to you. That will go a long way, in my opinion.
No, 100%. And it's not a one-sided conversation. I've said this so many times, right? You need men of quality who believe in women's equality to pound the table for us, you
Oh, I
know?
like that. I'm stealing that. Men of quality who believe in women's equality. Love
Girl, I said it was at the panel the last time too. It's like, because it's true. And I mean, the two people, the gentleman that introduced us, I consider them the men of quality in my life. So there's that. So, because you do, it is not a one sided conversation. And in order for us to break the glass ceilings, we need them to pound for us, right? Because they're still exactly the sponsors that will enable us to do that. But it is this two sided conversation. And
Yeah.
you need more of that. You need to continue to kind of break it down. And I think that that's really, really important. But I also appreciate the fact that you said, yeah, it's a quota. And I think this is exactly the reason why I also wrote this book, right? You went through Black Lives Matter. You went through API hate during the pandemic. And suddenly you have all these conversations in companies that are saying, we are authentically diverse. Are you? Is it a real, truly genuine conversation? Or is it a checkbox and compliance? And you and I have had so many conversations around other companies that I've talked to who said, we were founded not as a diverse company, but we're working our way through that. And this is one of the reasons why we're talking to you.
Be authentic. Exactly.
Be authentic about it.
It's better to be authentic. It's almost better for a big company to publish something that says, hey, we're not there yet. We're not as diverse as we want to be, because we actually care about the women that are trying to enter. Here's the positions we want to offer them, but we're trying to find qualified candidates to get there. I would prefer that level of authenticity rather than saying, I have one Black person, 3 females, and this person this age on my board in my boardroom, and therefore I check all of the boxes. Who cares?
100%.
Because then it's like, what if they're not even qualified to be there, and you just like checked off a bunch of boxes because that's what the public wants you to say?
Yeah, and I've had also the situation where you'd rig an interview process or a conversation with your company just to put people of color, whatever people of color that you have or whatever women that you have, to put in front of me to give me that perception that you're diverse. Like, it doesn't work that way. Like what? I've had so many stories of people. You put the one.
And be a pretty face.
Exactly. And I've said that. I remember saying that one time in a meeting. I said, so just to be clear, right? My role in this meeting is to be the pretty face, and they're like, no. Like, really, truly, what am I doing in this meeting? Because I've had that before, where I've had people say, I need a woman in this room, or I need an Asian woman or a diverse woman in this room. Like, it's like.
Oh, okay. My favorite is our client is bringing his wife, so you need to be there. Sure, I'll entertain the wife.
It's exactly that kind of conversation. I mean, the book, I didn't expect to write this so quickly or to finish it so quickly. I've been thinking about it. I never expected to publish so fast and to be having this conversation. God. I think part of me is somewhat nervous. This is really an act of really strong courage on my behalf on multiple levels, of just putting my story out of there, because it's not so much just about corporate America and the narrative that I want out of that. So much of it is also my personal transformation and my personal growth of understanding my personal values that drove me to ambition beyond, and what this, new Christine is kind of emerging as a little bit more vulnerable than like the previous Christine, right? To really more bringing my authentic self and frankly not being apologetic about who I am anymore. So.
Yeah. I mean, what I love about the book mostly is because I love fiction, right? I love reading fiction because it tells you a story. It tells you a story that you can visualize in your head, and depending on how creative you are and how visual you are. But when I read something, I put myself in the position of the story, and so I can see it from A to Z, and I can almost feel everything the person in the story, the hero or heroine has been going through, right? And so it's nice to read your stories. It's not just about you personally. You've also told stories of your observations that involve people that are not even you. You weren't even there, or you weren't in the room, but you observed something that made a big impact. So you're not, I read a lot of the books where it's like, hey, here's my story for the last 20 years. Here's how I got to where I got to. Those are amazing. but that is a one-sided story. You mix in comparisons and other people's observations and your take on what you saw and your experience with what you experienced, and I think that's going to resonate with your audience a lot better than most of the books that are trying to do what you're doing. But yours is just a different level of authenticity that I haven't seen before. So I have every confidence in you, Christine. I think no matter how this goes, and I know it's gonna go really fast, but I think you're gonna feel really, really good about yourself.
I mean, it's a love story. That's how it really started. It's still a love story.
Yeah, you want to tell us about that?
But I mean, it is a lot. It's so much of it is just really, that transformation about us as bringing our authentic self and really valuing our humanity, right, and connection.
But it is, I think, you kind of said it really perfectly. It's a love story. That says so much more than just the fact that it's a love story, right? It's like, what kept you going? It could have been that love. It could have been that relationship. It could have been that friendship. It could have been what you promised your parents you would do. It could have been, what you saw your parents do. Like anything that you held on to for so long that kept you going is the most important thing in everybody's story.
And I think that's really just the most important thing about life is these types of moments.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for your time, for just doing this, and just for being the most awesome friend I've ever had, and just being such a great champion of, it's reciprocal, right, for each other. So,
Anytime. Once that connection was made, I mean, when it took us 5 minutes to bond, we've known about each other for so long, and, we've talked to each other through other people, but it took 5 minutes sitting down to actually understand we communicate the same way, we have similar values, and we're not able to give each other crap. It's that's what friendships are. So I hope you have a lot of people on your side once the book is launched, which I think you will, because you're going to touch a lot of hearts.
Always fun breaking glass ceilings with you.
That's right.
All right. We'll talk soon. Thank you for listening to my podcast. I hope this has inspired you to continue the fight for equality, challenge stereotypes, and lift as we climb. Amplify the conversation on social media, following at DuqueCD and DuqueCD.com. #Shattering Glass in Heels.